Okay, one last go here on tolerances of orientation. I've got a couple of feature control frames drawn on the board here. These are from figure 614 and 615. So 614 and 615. And what this example is intended to show is some of the more subtle things that you can do when you're defining a tolerance zone. And again, I'm not going to say that either one of these practices are real common. One is certainly more common than the other, and I'll try to explain why. But let's sort of look at this. Now you'll need to follow along. I haven't drawn the picture of the part, but you can see that we're dealing with a hole in a block. It has a size 50.16 millimeters on the least material condition, maximum material condition 50 millimeters. And we have this feature control frame. Okay, so by now you know that this composite control frame means that the upper control is for translation, that is preventing the hole from moving around in X and Y any more than the tolerance will allow, and that really isn't anything we're going to be concerned about. Just to say that positional controls often accompany orientation controls to take care of that translational degree of freedom. We're more concerned here about what's going on with this perpendicularity control. Again, perpendicularity is just a special case of angularity, but it is a rotational degree of freedom in all cases. And what we are trying to do is prevent the center line of that hole from being too out of perpendicular with datum surface A. Nothing unusual there. What is unusual here, and the thing that always sort of catches everyone's breath, even engineers when they see it, is I know I have a perpendicularity control. I know I'm going to define a tolerance zone around the center line of that hole. I know it's a diametral tolerance zone. It's going to be a cylinder that starts where the feature starts, ends where the feature ends, and it has zero tolerance. Okay, so the one thing every machinist and every engineer is taught is that every feature has a tolerance. Not always easy to find, but you always get some tolerance. Now here we seem to be violating that rule, and we're not really. And let me explain what is happening here. I guess that's not supposed to have the decimal point. The Europeans don't use a decimal point when there is a zero value, so I don't like that particularly, but there it is. So that is a zero diameter, but it's a zero diameter at maximum material condition. So when this hole is at 50 millimeters at its maximum material condition, you have zero perpendicularity tolerance. In other words, if you are going to bore this hole at 50 millimeters, you get zero tolerance. What does that suggest to you? It suggests to you that you want to bore the hole up a little bit, and you bore it up, or you can bore it up all the way to 50.16. That is the least material condition limit. So if you need perpendicularity tolerance, and you do, you'll need something because you can't get it perfectly square, you will start boring up, and you can potentially increase this tolerance zone from 0 to 0.16. And that is probably the best example of what you're going to call a bonus tolerance. In other words, you can take as much tolerance as you need as long as you stay within these limits of size. But starting out, at least material condition, you get zero. Now this is not uncommon, I will say. It's not something you're going to encounter every day, but it is very useful. It's very useful for engineers when we do the calculations to make sure things are going to fit together. This is a nice little basis to start our calculations. It makes things a little simpler. But it basically tells you that you cannot produce that hole at 50 millimeters unless it's absolutely dead perfectly square and you're asking for it. So you would obviously move up into the tolerance band a little bit more, increase the size of the hole and gain some tolerance back. Okay, so don't let that zero fool you. You do get tolerance, but you have to determine what it is, and it obviously can never violate the limit of size, so the most you're going to get is 0.16 millimeters. So what is 0.16 millimeters? Is, I don't know, 6 thousandths, something like that, a reasonable tolerance. Okay, so this is called zero tolerance at maximum material condition. Again, it's something that you're going to encounter throughout the GD&T controls. And it is off-putting a little bit until you figure out what it's telling you. So it doesn't mean that you're not going to get any tolerance ever, but you'll only get it if you make the hole closer to least material condition. Okay, let's look at figure 615 and see what that's saying. Now this is obviously the same part, obviously the same control, but it's packed full of other little tidbits here that we have to sort out. Okay, so we've already figured this out. We figured this out. We know that at maximum material condition we get zero tolerance. Now we have another diameter symbol, a 0.1 and a max. Not an M in a circle, but the abbreviation max. Okay, what this means is that it may be that the limits of size from 50 to 50.16 or an allowance of that is too much. We may not want the tolerance zone to be 0.16 when the hole is at 50.16, when it's at least material condition. So what we're going to do is basically put a limit, put a stop at some point and say you can have zero tolerance at 50.16. At 50.1 you can have 0.1 tolerance, but after that, after 50.1, so 50.11, you still get 0.1 all the way up to 50.16. So bottom line is you're going to get at most 0.1 millimeters of additional tolerance. So your tolerance zones ranges anywhere from 0 at maximum material condition to 0.1 all the way up to least material condition. So again, that takes some pretty fancy engineering to figure that out. Again, I don't know that I've ever seen it done, but the standard does allow it, and you have to sort of unpack this. This is starting to get like an artichoke here. There's leaves of information that we have to peel away and figure out as we go along, and it pretty much follows along as you read. The initial tolerance zone, the fact that you can modify it based on the size of the feature, and here it is just saying you can't have all the way up to 0.16. You got to stop at 0.1. Again, this is very sophisticated. I like the fact that the tool is there and it's explicit all in one place. You don't have to look at any notes or anything like that. So if you're going to do something like that, this is a pretty nice way to do it. But even if I saw it, I would have to go back to the handbook and figure out exactly what the limits of the tolerance zone are. So, and this is sort of getting into the weeds a little bit. I'm not going to hold you responsible for this, but I do want you to know that you can do some pretty impressive things with the tolerance zone depending on the requirements of the design.